A truck driver and a restaurant owner face off against an ancient sorcerer in San Francisco's Chinatown. Join us as we chat about the future of James Bond, exposition that's so bad it's good, and the perfect comeback to someone who refers to themselves in the third person. Then we find out if Big Trouble in Little China stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time. My name is Alan Noah, and the Jack Burton to my Wang Chi is you, James Brief.
That's me, James Brief. It's good to see you, Al. Good to talk to you. I'm excited to talk about Big Trouble in Little China. This is the third Kurt Russell, John Carpenter film we've reviewed. The fourth one.
Oh, right. Yes, because we did both Escape from New York and Escape from LA, and we did The Thing.
That's right. And, before we talk about that, I want to talk about a big piece of news that kind of rocked Hollywood, referring to the legendary Hollywood character James Bond. It's been controlled by the Broccoli family for decades. And a few years ago, Amazon purchased MGM's library for like $100 million or $1 billion. I don't remember what it was, but it was a one with a lot of zeros after it. Basically, they were purchasing it because of the rights to James Bond. But recently, there was a huge announcement made. The Broccoli family has ceded control and creative control, that's the big thing, to Amazon. Man, I'm really hoping James Bond does not become a series, because I think James Bond is one of those things that is best served once every 4 or 5 years, or, 3 to 5 years.
It was another $1 billion that Amazon paid for the creative control of the James Bond franchise, in addition to whatever they paid for MGM years ago.
Oh, wow.
So this was a separate deal that cost another $1 billion. I hear what you're saying about the TV series. I think that what they ultimately want to do is to create another cinematic universe, which honestly makes my eyes roll even just saying the words. But I think that's what they want to go for. My guess would be that James Bond would continue to have big screen adventures, but maybe there's a TV show with Q or Moneypenny or some villain who's, kind of a minor character in one movie, but is going to be the big bad in the next one. So you can have the TV shows be interconnected. I think there will be TV shows, but not necessarily a James Bond story told over 12 episodes, 5 seasons kind of a thing.
Right. And I don't think that has ever worked to connect television and movies. Through the years, there have been many attempts to kind of thread movies and then TV shows that are connected. In the 80s, there was Twin Peaks, and then they made kind of a flop movie. In the 90s, X-Files made a movie that kind of bridged the gap between a season or two. Has this ever been done successfully where they've bridged both of them?
Yes, I think they've done it successfully with a lot of the Marvel and the Star Wars projects. More so Marvel, where the things are connected going back and forth. Specifically, there's a new Captain America movie that really is a direct sequel to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which picked up after Avengers Endgame. You could skip the TV show probably and understand what's going on, but there are characters in the movie that are from the TV show. To your point about, the 80s and 90s stuff, sure, but I think Marvel's doing that fairly well in terms of weaving the stories together. Whether people are watching all of the content is another story. Even the Marvels, which I know was a flop, that had Captain Marvel team up with Ms. Marvel. Where did you know about Ms. Marvel? From her Disney Plus show.
You're absolutely right. So I was wrong there. And I guess the nature of streaming at your own leisurely pace, you might want to watch a series XYZ first. You're right.
I think separately from the TV show part of it, the real reason why Amazon paid this extra $1 billion was because they want to make a new James Bond movie now. And the Broccolis are taking their time, and they've been very slow and very deliberate, and they haven't even announced who the next James Bond is going to be. And from a fan perspective, from my point of view, yeah, sure, that's cool. Take your time, figure it out. I don't need a new James Bond movie every couple of years. But in the Hollywood environment that we live in now, IP is the most important thing in the world. And if you own IP, you need to crank that out. You need to do it regularly, and you have to do it on a schedule. And every year that a giant IP blockbuster doesn't come out, that is lost revenue. So for Amazon, this slow and steady approach just isn't fucking working. Yeah. I read something that I'd completely forgotten about, but do you remember after Die Another Day, there were talks about making a Jinx spin-off movie with Halle Berry? And like, as a fan, I was like, cool, I would see Halle Berry as a sexy spy in a 2-hour movie. Why the hell not? And the reason that that never happened was because the Broccolis squashed it. They are very, very protective, or they were, I guess, of the IP. And so now, yeah, they can do the spin-offs and everything else. But I think really what Amazon is looking to get out of this deal is a new movie sooner rather than later.
It has been a number of years since, what was, I know it was during lockdown, No Time to Die.
Yeah, No Time to Die was the most recent Bond movie. That came out in 2021. I think it was supposed to come out in 2020 before COVID. So yeah, it has been going on 4 years since the most recent one, and not a peep about who will be the next James Bond, who's going to write, who's going to direct, what the story's going to be, what direction are they going to take the franchise. You would think there would have been some movement, and there really has been none, which is why I think Amazon was willing to spend the extra $1 billion. Also, Jeff Bezos can afford another $1 billion. That's not really a big deal for him.
Didn't they spend was it $1 billion on the Lord of the Rings, or $100 million? It was definitely something obscene that they spent on the first season of that Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power or something. So yeah, they basically do have unlimited money to spend on this stuff. So I really hope that they find their Peter Jackson, someone who is just really passionate about it. I hope it's someone who has some action experience, some drama experience.
They're not going to look for a director right away. They're not even going to go and look for an actor to play James Bond right away. The first thing that they're going to look for is their Kevin Feige, their producer who's going to be in charge of the James Bond franchise. Presumably that person's first big announcement and their big task will be to find the James Bond who will play the character in the movies. But their first item of business is to find that producer who's going to be in charge. Kevin Feige is the gold standard. TBD what kind of a job James Gunn does. But yeah, they're not looking for a director first. First up is the producer. But let's talk about Big Trouble in Little China, because this is a movie that I had wanted to see for a long time. I'd never seen it before, which is kind of weird, I think, because I like Kurt Russell and I love a lot of 80s action movies, but I just never got around to this one. Had you seen this movie before?
Yes, I had seen this film. This was either a cassette rental from the local video store, probably not even Blockbuster. This was like the local store, I don't think I've seen this since the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I did not remember this film at all. I completely thought that Kurt Russell's character would be a very different character than he turned out to be. Because I've seen that, I'm sure you have, this iconic 80s poster of Kurt Russell in this white tank top, and he's got an Uzi on the top. And I really thought this was going to be Kurt Russell is kind of a Snake Plissken, action hero that comes in. I really thought that this film would be something it turned out not to be.
Right. So for anyone who hasn't seen it or it's been a while, the movie's about truck driver Jack Burton and his friend Wang Chi. Wang's fiancée Mao Yin is kidnapped and held prisoner by the sorcerer Lo Pan. Jack and Wang infiltrate Lo Pan's hideout in San Francisco's Chinatown, but they're not alone. There's Wang's friend Eddie, a reporter named Margot, an expert about mysticism named Egg Shen, and a lawyer named Gracie Law. Eye roll. There's an epic throwdown where Wang and Jack prevent Lo Pan from marrying Mao Yin and sacrificing Gracie. So I know that this movie has become a cult classic. It has become beloved over the years, but it was a flop when it first came out, right?
Oh yeah, this movie was notoriously a big flop. It wound up only with $11 million total. It opened at number 12 when it came out on July 4th, 1986.
Yikes.
And, this is the 80s when, for better or for worse, there was a really big influx of Asian and Asian martial arts themed films. Maybe this all started with Bruce Lee in the 70s, but you definitely had the 80s ninja films. There was another film that had similar themes to this. We'll review it at some point. The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy.
Right.
Apparently, this film they purposely shifted around the release dates so that it didn't compete with Eddie Murphy's film.
Yeah.
This film wound up being very successful on rental on VHS cassette, and there have been talk for years about sequels, and The Rock was going to pick up the series, and there are bands named after Lo Pan, and it's a well-known piece of IP that did not do well at the box office. They just didn't know how to market it. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the trailer or anything.
No.
The trailer was completely action. Kurt Russell's character, Jack Burton, he's really not the hero in this film. He's kind of like the sidekick. Wang Chi mostly saves the day.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, and apparently Kurt Russell and John Carpenter both knew that this was going to be a very difficult film to market well. But man, a lot of people probably went into this film kind of looking for a kick-ass martial arts film. Like if you're looking for a Bruce Lee film, you would have been definitely disappointed with what you were shown because it's not a straight-up martial arts film.
So when the movie starts, there's a scene with Egg Shen talking to someone about how Jack Burton is a hero. And it's a very weird scene. And I was not at all surprised to find out that that was a late addition that the studio insisted on adding to really reinforce that Jack Burton is a hero because he's not in the movie. Apparently there's some rumor that Barry Diller, who was running Fox at the time, wrote that scene himself. And John Carpenter was like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. But the joke is that Jack Burton is not the hero. The point of the movie is that Jack Burton thinks he's a hero and he's not. And I will confess to you, when the movie started, I didn't get it. I started off this movie thinking, oh, this is a terrible, terrible action movie. It took me a little bit to kind of get into the mode of understanding what they were going for. And what they're going for is making fun of action movies. It is making fun of the Indiana Jones, Sylvester Stallone hero that just figures everything out and comes in and saves the day. Jack Burton is an arrogant truck driver who wants to be Indiana Jones, but very much isn't. And on the podcast, I have complained God knows how many times about movies that are white savior stories. This movie inverts that trope. You could put this movie on and very quickly think, okay, this is going to be another fucking white savior movie. Honestly, that thought did run through my head. But no, it's the opposite, where the white guy is the bumbling fool who is continually, repeatedly saved by everyone else. Jack just fucks shit up the entire time. And not like he fucks shit up like an action hero. I mean, like, oh no, he fucks shit up.
He messes up. Like, he messes
exactly.
up. There's a great scene, probably the part that made me laugh out loud. The climax of the film, all the good guys come together and they're facing off the army of the bad guys. And Jack raises his Uzi and shoots the ceiling a few times like he's a tough guy. Bang, 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 bang. And a few rocks of cement come and knock him out.
Yeah.
And he's like out of the first half of this action scene. I thought that was hysterical.
Sure.
And definitely thematic of the film.
Yeah.
And, you know, on that first scene, I do like that the very first scene does establish that there's magic in the film. However, I kept thinking there would be a bookend to that. Like, they would come back to that scene.
It doesn't pay off at all.
Yeah, it's totally just tacked on. But I was so happy to see James Hong in this film. I love James Hong. He is the old man in this film in 1986, and he's still alive. So I just love when he's in a film. And he's like second billing in this film, I think. Like,
oh, really? Maybe
I missed Kim Cattrall, but she's high up there too. But I think he might have been right after Kurt Russell.
Interesting. The shitty thing is that really the movie is Wang's story. And yeah. Dennis Dunn, who plays Wang Chi, he really thought that this was going to be his big break, and it wasn't. And that does suck because he was great in this movie. I thought he was funny and also good at the martial arts stuff. Like, it's easy to imagine a world where after this movie, he gets cast as not just the main character on paper, but, you know, the leading man on the poster. And it just didn't work out for him.
I thought he was so good in this film. He was a good actor, good martial artist. He's this young, handsome guy. I was convinced that I just didn't recognize him. I'm like, maybe he looks a lot different now or something. And I was really disappointed to see his filmography because all of his other roles are like one-name Asian guys. Like, his other roles are Ming and Chang, Pai Wu, and I'm like, man, like it's just too bad.
Yeah, and when you look at this movie from a modern lens, as we do here on The Test of Time, this movie, it is, in a way, problematic, and it does kind of lean into some Asian stereotypes, but there's a ton of Asian representation. I mean, like, most of the cast, other than Kurt Russell and Kim Cattrall, it's mostly Asian actors, and also like diversity among the Asian actors. There are some Chinese actors and second, third generation Americans. Some of the actors speak in Cantonese. Some actors speak in Mandarin. Some have very thick accents. Some have basically no accents. John Carpenter didn't care. He didn't try to force people to be things that they weren't, because in a real Chinatown, there's going to be lots of different types of people. And honestly, this movie is pretty progressive when you think about it, that they aren't just doing the thing of making fun of Asian cultures. They're really treating it with some reverence. And John Carpenter loved martial arts films. He loved movies from China, from Hong Kong. This movie really kind of feels like an homage to a lot of them. You could very easily point the finger at someone like George Lucas, who kind of ripped off a lot of samurai movies and didn't hire Japanese actors in Star Wars, as opposed to John Carpenter, who wanted to make a martial arts movie. And yes, he's a white guy, and yes, so is Kurt Russell, but he just brought in so many Asian actors. And apparently a lot of the mysticism in this movie is also based on real Chinese stories and legends and lore. And he worked with other people to make it more authentic. I mean, it's pretty fucking cool. at any time, but especially in 1986, that's just damn impressive.
I can't think of too many films that were predominantly starring Asians. And I remember them making a big deal in the 90s when the Joy Luck Club came out. And that was like, wow, there's a movie starring, predominantly all Asian cast. And even like a couple years ago when Crazy Rich Asians came out, 40 years after Big Trouble in Little China, that they're still talking about, wow, a major movie with all Asian cast.
Well, the year before this movie came out, a movie called Year of the Dragon was released, and that starred Mickey Rourke as a cop fighting the triads in Chinatown. And that movie was really blasted for being anti-Asian and, really just playing into a lot of negative stereotypes about Asians and organized crime and things like that. And all of the Asians in that movie were apparently just villains and bad guys. So I read. I have never seen it. And when people found out that they were making a movie called Big Trouble in Little China, people in the Asian community were understandably concerned about what this movie was going to be. And John Carpenter had to say, no, we're not going to be like Year of the Dragon. We're going to do a much better job. And there are still some people who looked at Big Trouble in Little China and said, yeah, you still are doing the whole Chinese or mystics and magic thing. And God, that's annoying. But there is still so much of that, the other positive representation, that I think on the whole, people are far more appreciative of Big Trouble in Little China. I wanted to talk to you about the effects, the special effects in this movie, because some of them are pretty hokey. The giant eyeball creature looks like a cheesy special effect from a low-budget 80s movie. Some of the Lopan stuff where he's an apparition, that looks very green screeny. His makeup when he's just old man Lopan, that looks really good. He looks like this 1,000-year-old Methuselah type character, and that makeup I thought was really good. It's kind of hit or miss. Some of the laser eyes stuff is kind of eye roll worthy. The giant creature in the sewer, I think, kind of works because you only see it for half a second. So it's like, I didn't really know what that was, but big scary monster, sure.
I found some of it humorous, but I'm not sure I was meant to find it humorous because it was cheesy, but I almost felt like it was humorously cheesy, but I think they may have meant for it to be kind of serious. There was one guy and his face just starts inflating and his limbs start inflating and then he just kind of like pops. And I couldn't tell whether this was the best they could do in some ways because this is before CGI, or I mean, technically there was some CGI back then, but John Carpenter does a lot of these practical effect special effects. So I'm really trying to figure out from a lens of a 1986 person if they would have thought some of these things were cool or not. I think like the lightning was neat. Some of the ladies, when they open their eyes, I don't know, they're wearing like white contact lenses or something. And
yeah,
that's an effect I always kind of think is kind of cool. I almost was like at the premiere, if I laughed at those effects, would I be insulting them or would I be in on the joke? I don't know.
That's a good question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I do feel like I had that more with some of the dialogue. There is some horrifically clunky exposition in this movie. The first time I heard it, I was like rolling my eyes of, oh dear God, this is just horrifically, terribly written dialogue. And then, the second through the 17th times when they were talking about what happened to Lopan and the emperor, blah, 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 I was like, oh, this is supposed to be bad exposition. That's the point. And then I loved it because I realized that they were doing it deliberately.
Yeah, there's a reporter, not Kim Cattrall, but the other white woman.
Margot.
She's like, Lopan, you mean the famous Chinese banker who hasn't been seen in years, and the last time anyone saw him was this and this and this, and then if anyone ever saw him again, they would do blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is such bad exposition.
But I think that exposition and a lot of other things in this movie do fall into the category of so bad it's good. And that is a fucking tough nut to crack. I think that is very, very, very hard to do. And as I said, I didn't get it right away when the movie started. But throughout the movie, I was like, oh, that's what they're going for. And yeah, it's true of the exposition. It's true of a lot of the quote unquote action sequences where Burton just does nothing right, where he's like on the wheelchair and he accidentally knocks over a couple of goons and then almost falls into a pit. The way he does a sit-up and saves his life out of the wheelchair, I thought that was kind of impressive because the core strength required for that. That's not an easy thing to do. But so much of it is leaning into that, hey, isn't this kind of stupid? It works because you don't normally see that in movies, and this movie leans into it. Another great example of that is the lipstick on Jack Burton. At one point, Gracie Law kisses him, and there's just a lipstick smudge on his face for a few more scenes. Apparently that happened because on set, he had the lipstick on his face. Someone told Kurt Russell that, and he was going to wipe it off. And he said, how come in movies there's never a lipstick smudge after a big passionate kiss? Shouldn't there be a lipstick smudge? And then John Carpenter said, yeah, you're right. Why don't we leave it? Okay, sure. It was just a spur of the moment decision, but it's really fucking funny. I give Kurt Russell a lot of credit because not only was he coming up with ideas on set, but do you remember that thing about how The Rock and Vin Diesel had it like in their contracts where neither one could beat up the other one? And there were people on set, like in their entourages, who were counting the number of punches that they took. They don't want to look bad, right? Because they're the big burly action stars and they have to look like big burly action stars in their big burly action star roles. And Kurt Russell comes off of some movies where he is an action star and he just wants to play the buffoon. He really advocated for that angle in this movie. He's like, I want to be the dumbass. I want to be the guy who knocks himself out. You mentioned where he shoots the machine gun at the ceiling and then he gets knocked out. After he finally comes to in that fight, he manages to stab a bad guy with like the blade in his shoe, and then the guy is just stuck to him. So now he's out for another few minutes and he's just like missing all of the action scenes. That is just fucking awesome that Kurt Russell had that ability to say, yeah, I just want to look like an idiot. And apparently before they kind of landed on that, he did bulk up for the role. You know, he was like hitting the gym and working out a lot. And then they kind of figured out that he wasn't going to be the typical action star. And then he didn't do any martial arts training, so he wouldn't look good. The other actors are good at martial arts, and he's just the putz who wants to be but doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and it really shows Kurt Russell's range, because he can be the amazing Snake Plissken, and he could also be in Breakdown. He's a random suburban husband who like has no idea how to do any action, and in this one he's a little halfway. But yeah, Kurt Russell, to his credit, he doesn't need the point system where
Right.
Okay, it's 2 blows to the face, but I get a kick in the stomach, and
Yeah.
and The Rock better not have any more dents than I do in those other bad guys' faces.
Yeah. One other random thing about Jack Burton, not Kurt Russell, but the character. Jack Burton refers to himself as Jack Burton. And I hate it when people refer to themselves in the third person. That always just strikes me as weird whenever I hear it in real life. When I hear it in a movie, my thought is, the writer said, I need to add some quirky characteristic for this character. I know I'll have them refer to themselves in the third person because that's a thing that quirky people do. But when I hear it in an action movie, then I think, okay, now they're just doing it to sell action figures. They're repeating the name so that you in the audience remember that Jack Burton's name is Jack Burton, and Jack Burton is your favorite action hero, and you're going to love Jack Burton, Jack Burton, Jack Burton. But there's something about it in this movie. Maybe it's Kurt Russell's delivery, or you know what? Maybe it is. Actually, I think I cracked it. It's the part where he says, well, you know, it's like Jack Burton always says. And one of the bad guys says, who?
Yes.
And that's just so goddamn funny.
It reminded me of Star-Lord, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right. And Kurt Russell played Star-Lord's dad in the second movie, bringing it all together. It's just such a perfect distillation of, you think you're this tough guy, but who the fuck are you? There's no reason for these bad guys to know his name. And why would they? And why would they care? I wanted to get your take on the ending, specifically the part where Jack doesn't end up with Gracie. It's not just that they don't end up together in the way that you think that they will. He just walks away. He's basically like, yeah, I could stay here with you, but I rub people the wrong way. And she says, oh, well, maybe I could come with you. And he's like, eh. And then he walks out, and then Margot says, well, aren't you even going to kiss her goodbye? And he's like, no. And the movie ends with just him in his truck. He's driving away. He's spewing some nonsense, referring to himself in the third person on his CB, and then you see one of the creatures in the back. Okay, whatever. But like, I was kind of thinking about it that in a way that's a shitty ending, not because he doesn't end up with the girl, but because he has no arc. Like, he goes on this adventure, he learns no lesson, his life at the end of the movie is exactly the same as it was in the beginning of the movie, and that's stupid. But if you look at the movie the other way, where Wang is really the hero and Jack Burton is a sidekick, well then, yeah, it makes perfect sense. The sidekick doesn't get the girl. The sidekick doesn't learn a lesson. The sidekick doesn't have to have an arc where they are transformed by their adventure. I mean, it's nice when that happens, but those are the things that you expect for the main character. And yeah, the main character is Wang. He gets the girl. He gets the beautiful green-eyed bride of his dreams. So yeah, it's fine that Jack Burton doesn't end up with Kim Cattrall, because why would he? He's the sidekick. Who gives a shit? What did you think about that?
I feel like this movie, like in the last shot of the film, kind of sets up a sequel. I feel like had a sequel been made, that they would have gotten together. They would have brought her back in this film. Although, interestingly, this is the second Kim Cattrall film that we've seen. Do you remember the first one we saw her in?
And we can build this dream together, standing tall forever. Nothing's gonna stop us now. If you thought I was just gonna say the word mannequin, oh boy, we have not met.
Yeah, mannequin. And I do feel like they maybe were setting it up that maybe he'll get together in the next one, because this film, like a lot of other films that we've talked about, including one of your favorite films, UHF, this film tested really well with test audiences. I think they might have thought they had a big hit on their hands, so that, we'll get it for the sequel, and they'll get together then.
Okay, that's fair. But let me ask you about the movie as a whole. Do you think that Big Trouble in Little China stands the test of time?
I do. I understand why this film both did not do well at the box office, and also I understand why it was later beloved. This film is very difficult to market, especially in the 80s when you're not going to have the internet. I feel like this is the kind of film that might be one of those things that if you had the internet, you might slowly hear about it. But I got it. I understood the film. I understood what it was trying to do. And I understood what it wasn't trying to be, which was a straight up martial arts action film. So I liked it. I liked the humor in it. I do think the film stands the test of time. I think helping it is the fact that in the zeitgeist, people are going to tell you this movie is funny or this film is crazy. People are not going to say, this is Crouching Tiger. This is like great action. This is like peak 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger action. That's not what this film is. If you figure out what the film is, I do think you'll like it. It's not for everyone. Like if I show this film to my parents, I think they would hate this film. Campy is, I guess, the word I'd use, but yeah, a little bit campy, but it's not trying to be like that. It's just trying to go for a different thing. And I don't think there's many films like this. I can't think of another. And I enjoyed this film. I think it stands the test of time. What did you think, Al? 1986's Big Trouble in Little China. Most people, it took them a while to find it, but when they did find it, they enjoyed it. Is that the same thing for you?
Yeah, I definitely think the movie stands the test of time. You bring up a good point of, does this movie count as camp? I don't know about that. Maybe. I would probably want to think about that a little bit more, but I think it is definitely a spoof. And it is very, very funny. It works for me as a movie that is intentionally bad, like going for the it's so bad it's good. I think that's a hard thing to pull off. I also think that, yeah, when you do that, you're probably going to have a movie that is a cult classic, that is kind of niche, that people who love it really love it, and most people are just not going to get it, or not care, or not be into it, or not really have the right vibes or whatever. I agree with you. Yeah, is it surprising that this movie bombed at the box office? No. Is it a shame? Yes. It is not what I thought it would be going into it, which is another kind of Snake Plissken type role where Kurt Russell kicks a lot of ass and ends up with the girl and, blows up a lot of stuff in Chinatown. It's not that. It's a subversion of action movie tropes. It is a subversion of the white savior narrative. It is a homage to martial arts films that does have really good martial arts in it. Like, some of the wire work I thought was damn impressive. I was reading that apparently at the big fight at the end, they were doing less wire work and more trampolines, because I think they were just running out of time and running out of budget, and so they had to just do what they needed to do. Yeah, some of the shots look kind of crappy. I don't even know what you call it. I guess the harness that they use when they're kind of like pulling each other out of the hole, that looks pretty dumb. Like, some of it is kind of hokey looking. But yeah, overall, I think this is a very entertaining movie. I really enjoyed it. I'm kind of disappointed that I'd never seen it before, but I'm very happy that I saw it. And yeah, I definitely think it stands the test of time. That is going to do it for us this week. Our next episode comes out on March 14th, which is Pi Day. So I thought we should watch the Darren Aronofsky movie, Pi. Right? Like, that just makes logical sense. What else would we watch for Pi Day?
Life of Pi?
Yeah, but that doesn't really have anything to do with pi. Like 3.14159.
Yeah, that's true. And this film does have to do with the actual mathematical number pi.
Right. Until then, we want to hear from you. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Let us know your thoughts on Jack Burton and Wang Chi and Lopan and Gracie Law, the lawyer, which is the stupidest fucking name ever. But again, that's pretty funny because it's so bad, I think.
It sounds like a Friday night CBS show. That would be like, for old people. Gracie Law, Fridays at 9 on CBS.
Definitely. We will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.